my colleague from the CCAB, Philip Ducharme, is on the roundtable right now, and he's speaking later, is look at the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business. They're truly an authoritative organization in Canada that's doing good, and they've got a number of products and services that are benefiting this exact topic.
Wow. Well, that is fantastic. That is really good. And I think it is important, like you say, it is important that we do educate ourselves about the Truth and Reconciliation. And certainly, where can I get one of those booklets from?
Mm-hmm. So all of the archives from the process are now housed within the Truth and Reconciliation organization, which is at the University of Manitoba. So if you Google it, I think then like up at the top, once you're on the website, there's a store. You can buy books, you can buy a t-shirt, you could buy a scooter for your kids. There's lots of great branded things, but it really is it's a great starting point to really understand reconciliation as a relationship and what those principles are, and then build from there.
Yeah. Wow. Are there any further questions for Annie at all before I ask my final question? You can be brave and speak without. I feel like someone is about to say something.
It's Franco here, Niketi, and I would love. I'm sorry I got a little late, but like I've worked in the social sector all my life. Okay, so that coming from an agency perspective, or that kind of thing, which we're struggling in the same kind of ways. Would you have any advice for us? I guess that would be.
Yeah, and Franco, have you done any sort of groundwork yet as an organization?
No, I think what it is, I'm really just applying generally. Because you can tell by my hair, I'm kind of retired or rewired, but I'm still volunteering in a bunch of places, so that perhaps we, advance it from another perspective.
Mm-hmm. You know what, it doesn't have to be, I mean, some clients, it's a huge process, multiple, I was at Imperial Oil, there were 6,000 people on the team. Right. But for smaller organizations, again, I would go back to the TRC. They have 10 principles for reconciliation. Reading those, sitting with your team and a whiteboard again for an hour, and looking at how those principles can be woven into the work that you're doing. And then slowly, as you talk about things more, it becomes the norm. And really, you can sort of take that responsibility on it as yourself to say, at a meeting, say, that reminds me with principle 4. I think that there's an opportunity to weave in reconciliation into whatever it is we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Wow. Well, and I have one. Thank you so much for that question, Franco. You look better, by the way.
Thank you.
I have a question. So if, let's say I'm not, but it's just a hypothetical example. If I was a distributor and I had access to the likes of Walmart, Costco, and things like that, and I was looking for an Indigenous owned business or product that I can sort of connect with and buy their products and supply to these bigger chain stores, what would be the process?
Absolutely. Well, there's, like I mentioned, there's nearly 56,000 Indigenous businesses, and a great go-to spot to start that market analysis really is the procurement portal that it's a network, it's an online portal that the CCAB has. And so you can seek out, you log in, you get an account, you work with Philip, you get an account, and then you log in and you look and you see what exists. What are the products and services that are out there that you can start to bring into your store, Walmart, for example. Mm-hmm. That's really the first step in saying, what do I need? What do I want to sell? What do I need to sell? And then, using this portal is a great first step. The CCB also has resources to support that work, because a lot of their work is they're trying to bring in businesses into this database to make it as robust as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So that if I know that I've got a project going, pipeline project going to British Columbia, and I'm going to need PPE in the Fort St. John area, you go into the database and you look and you say, who are the Indigenous owned businesses that can supply PPE in Fort St. John?
Okay. Okay. That's comprehensible. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're
And I
welcome.
think if there aren't any other questions, I think we're meant to now go back to swap card, and so that you can choose your next roundtable. And thank you very much, Annie. Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. I most certainly learned a lot. So I've just received a message here from Fern, and it says, after the session, please go back to swap card and choose your next roundtable. So thank you, Annie, and I'll see you all at another session.
I think we've got a bunch of new people that have just joined us as well for our second.
Oh, the second. Okay. Okay. So we'll have some leaving and some coming back. Cool. Welcome to the new ones.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. You all are very prompt. That's fantastic. It's really great to have you all here this morning. And excuse me. Actually, I just realized I didn't introduce myself, but I think I saw most of you yesterday. My name is Nketi, and I'm going to be moderating the session with Annie Korver this morning on corporate supply chains. And she's going to be focusing on Indigenous inclusion through social procurement. But before we start, Annie, could you just introduce yourself, please?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone here. My name is Annie Korver, and I am the founder of Rise Consulting, which was created in 2013 after some time working with Calgary Economic Development and working in my master's program. I created Rise Consulting with a focus on Indigenous inclusion activities and partnering with organizations working in Canada and recently in the US, strategy development, community engagement, economic development initiatives related to employment, training, business development, and investment. These are all areas of focus of my organization. It's a purpose-driven organization, the purpose being to support the rising presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada. And we do this through the creation of shared value between corporate and Indigenous communities. And over the past 7.5 years, I've had the great opportunity to work with a variety of organizations, both big and small, with really the commitment to focus on economic development and the creation of shared value, driving tangible net benefits to communities.
That's some really good stuff. What a powerhouse. Thank you, Annie. And as you know, our very first day was on diversity and inclusion. And so I'm really, really looking forward to our talk today. Because just like any cultural group, Indigenous people really offer unique attributes that contribute in important ways to business performance. And some companies actually cite that Indigenous people bring a unique decision-making process to their workplace, along with their traditional knowledge of lands and environmental stewardship and other characteristics that make their contribution to the workplace especially valuable. And the theme of diversity and inclusion really ought to guide companies in their recruitment strategies, seeking to develop a workforce with many different skill sets and perspectives. And so I'm really excited for us to really learn more about that Indigenous inclusion when it comes to corporate supply chains. So without further ado, well, before we start the questions, please don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat if you have any questions for Annie, and I'll feed it to her throughout her talk. So with your focus on Indigenous inclusion, will you please just tell us a little bit more about what this actually entails? I know you'll be speaking more about this with Tim Caldwell shortly, but can you just start by sharing a little bit about what Indigenous inclusion means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, a lot of the focus of my work is grounded in reconciliation and relationship. And as I work with organizations, I help them understand that there's an opportunity to work together and to provide a hand up versus a handout, and the opportunity to use objective data to illustrate tangible net benefits to communities quickly demonstrates that the creation of shared value can move beyond corporate social responsibility and become integral to profit maximization. And for those of you that are familiar with Michael Porter's work, you'll be familiar with CSV. And if you're not, Google him. It's a very simple yet powerful concept. When I work with organizations on strategy creation, I like to focus on 4 pillars. Leadership is really paramount, and it's the commitment from the executive team to moving forward in right relation and moving forward in a way that's inclusive with community. And really fostering an inclusive culture and ensuring accountability to the commitments that are made. The second pillar is around employment. So we were talking about diversity, equity, and employment, or sorry, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can have a diverse workplace, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's equitable or inclusive. And so the goal is to strike this balance, and really the role of leadership is imperative to that. That's third pillar is business development, taking purposeful steps to purchase products and services as required by the supply chain from Indigenous businesses, or to move into relationship with Indigenous businesses or communities where shared goals and objectives exist. And the fourth pillar, another very umbrella-like pillar, is community relations. And the tenet that I like to use is nothing about us without us. As an Indigenous woman, I can say that, or in community, you can say nothing about you without you. And really that we're looking for your feedback. We're looking to walk with you in partnership. And we're committed to building positive and progressive relationships built on trust and respect.
Wow, thank you. That is absolutely fantastic. You're doing some really, really great work there. And I really liked some of the things that you mentioned. So you say the purpose is rooted in providing a hand up and not a handout. I really, really like that concept. And you say nothing about you without you, and that you cannot make decisions on my behalf or make decisions that you think are going to benefit me or they're going to be to my advantage without really speaking with me and understanding how we can do it in the best possible way. So I think that's really, really important. And also moving beyond CSR. You know, corporate social responsibility is great, but what we want is to, yes, have that, but that's the baseline. After we've had that, how do we then progress from that? You know, you're now looking more into that profit maximization and mobilization, and I love that. And even when you talk about, you know, that diversity and equity, yes, it can be there, but it doesn't mean that it's inclusive. And that's what I guess brings in that culture piece, because that culture piece is so instrumental. Because I briefly spoke about that yesterday, where I was saying, you know, we can have all the great strategies and policies and plans, but if the workplace culture or just the culture in general is not there, then it becomes almost treacherous when it comes to implementation and actually being having long-term impact, if that makes sense. So the work that you're doing is really, really, really fantastic. Let me check the chat if there are. Okay, so I have a Vern here. So Vern says, has RISE worked with a cooperative business model and Indigenous communities, capital rising from local investors and projects that address the needs of community where markets have failed? Great question.
It's a big question. Thank you for just saying it. And I just threw it all in there. I think it would only be fair if I give a little background. So I'm with Service Credit Union. We're a financial cooperative. We've had very little over the years engagement with Indigenous communities and banking, and I've often wondered why that was the case, if it was just because of the nature of our business, of our membership, whatever. And I'd certainly like to see more of that going forward. I also have been a big part of the cooperative movement in Alberta, and I'm aware that some of these most pressing needs that markets have failed on present opportunities for cooperatives, at least the business model. So I just wanted to check in, Vanny, to see if there's any sort of your familiarity with the model if you've worked in that space?
Mm-hmm. You know, great question, Vern. And Wellington's a friend of mine. I was listening to him speak yesterday. You know, no, is I do not have direct experience in this space, but I run alongside it. You know, I was in a meeting with Bigani Nation 2 days ago. They were talking about this very thing, the need for capital, and as they plan, and you know, all communities are on a spectrum. You know, not all communities are ready. They're not. They don't have the capacity to have the conversations about this. And what this gentleman sort of said to me as we were meeting is he put up his hand and said, I need to know more about this. I have this vision, and there's this opportunity to really put in play this sort of description that I've just gone through, but he needs support. And not only does he just need the support, he needs support on understanding what that process looks like in developing their strategy to take advantage of the economic activity in their ancestral territory, which, you know, mines, road development, you know, there's lots happening.
Yes, I know there's been a lot of work and discussions actually at the provincial ministry level around primary healthcare as a cooperative on Indigenous communities. Mm-hmm. And so that was one, and a lot on renewable energy as well. Mm-hmm. I know that a group, Cooperatives First, has been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. And they've been largely funded by the Federated Cooperative Group, FCL, out of Regina, who runs all the retail co-ops, of which Calgary Co-op is a part of, and those kinds of groups. So it just seems to be a growing area. And I was really intrigued by your consulting practice. It fits a lot of where my background was, but now that I'm in the financial services, I see even a greater need there.
Yeah, there aren't enough folks in this space right now, Vern. You know, JP Gladue is a mentor of mine, and you may have seen his news. He was just this morning appointed to the board at Suncor. He's just been doing so much work, and he said this on a podcast last week that we need more Indigenous people stepping into these roles. And it's a neat space. It's a neat space to be able to really understand. You know, Dr. Reg Croshu talks about paralleling the white man and the Indian. When you have corporate knowledge and you can combine that with your Indigenous way of knowing and being, you kind of create this map and this roadmap together.
Wow. Thank you so much. Great question there, Vern. Wow. So I'll move on to my next question. So digging into the business development pillar, will you please talk about your experience with supply chain practices with the clients that you've worked with through RISE?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think earlier on I mentioned that I really have two areas of focus, and one being, you know, building presence within your organization and driving towards procuring products and services from Indigenous businesses, and the other being external and aligning yourself as you go after work together. And in the first case, I love this practice that I do with clients, and it's a internal supply chain analysis and then a market analysis. And you know, you push run on a report, and out comes, you know, a vendor list and how much money you spent with who, where, when. And then you get in a boardroom with some colleagues and you put a map on the whiteboard, and you start identifying, you know, somebody's on the Google machine and somebody's drawing on the whiteboard, and you say, you know, where can we start to make change? What do we know? Who's operating around us? What are those Indigenous businesses that are around us? And where can we start to learn about, you know, shifting and making a purchase locally? And there's lots of ways to do this. And a great example that I have where we did this recently was with a client who's in Sherwood Park, and Good Fish Lake First Nation owns a business corp that makes industrial overalls. Well, it was a really quick win. The overalls are made in community. They have about 185 staff, 80% of which self-identify as Indigenous. And because it's a 100% owned by the community. Its own source revenue and profits are directed to 3 community trusts: education, infrastructure, and business growth. And the business supports the events, or sorry, the things that are important to the community, such as events, such as a back to school program, treaty days. So it's really, that's a really great example, and one that for any of you that need overalls, check out Good Fish Lake. There's lots of things you can do though, with your organizations. You can have, a procurement session, an information session, in community, in partnership with other organizations. You can support business mentorship programs. You can create policies and practices to support Indigenous suppliers, or a contractor standard for contractors to your business to do the same. I'm a firm believer in what measured gets done. And Janet Lane spoke of this yesterday. She asked the question, what is accountability without measurement? And I think along the way, your ability to track, no one's going to expect that you're going to make a leap of 10%, within the first year as you do this, but sort of setting some goals and objectives and some KPIs will help you get there.
Wow. We have a few questions in the chat, but I just have one question. So maybe I could ask my final question. I'll take one question from the chat as well. So it sounds like there are a lot of opportunities. And so for us that are new, where do you suggest we start?
Yeah, I think, in the interest of time, I think starting with building your knowledge with reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has such great information, and you can Google it. You can order a load of these little books like I have and read Call to Action number 92 and think about your response personally and professionally, and think about what you can do to participate. Read the principles that are at the front. See where they align with your work. If you're familiar, you do business planning with your own organization, see where you can weave those principles into the work that you're doing.
Wow. Well, and I see Linda has a great question here. Thank you so much, Annie. We'll just take one question from Linda. So can Annie comment on large organizations and their procurement policies? Is there institutional limits and history that limits the opportunities for Indigenous suppliers? That's a great question. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And I see your next question as well, Linda. Yeah, I've actually registered for this session with Carolyn. She is well regarded in my cohort. She's a colleague. We've done some work together. So if you Google that and you hop onto her website, you'll be able to register for that event on the 30th. But are there limits? No, absolutely not. And I think that innovation, and what Tim will speak about in our keynote, will really inspire you. And so, I think if you hop back to the keynote, we'll speak more about that, and that really the growth opportunity, it doesn't need to be dependent on what exists in the market. If you can support, like through a business mentorship program, this is a great example. Your ability to share your skills with Indigenous business owners to help, elevate, rise, the presence that they have, there's no limits.
Yeah. Wonderful. This has been absolutely magnificent, and I've certainly learned a lot. We do have 1 minute, so I wonder if you have time for one last question. I'll just go for it. So my question is, so if I were Walmart and I wanted to source a product that was produced, let's say, by an Indigenous person or Indigenous business, how would I go about doing that?
I think a great starting point for Walmart, or for any other organization out there, is to really look into what the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Lit Business is doing. There's 56,000 Indigenous businesses in Canada. They're out there. The products and services exist. And what the CCAB is doing is they're working to bring all of those into a central database. And so a portal where you can log on and you can say, I'm looking for a widget. Where is that widget located? Or I'm going to be in Fort St. John as I build out this, infrastructure project in the energy industry. These are the widgets I need. Are they in Fort St. John, or where are they, in proximity to that local community?
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Annie. And thank you all for the questions, and thank you all for participating and for, coming to the conference. Annie, that was absolutely fantastic. I learned a lot, and I think you've given me lots of next steps. I need to make sure I get myself one of those books to make sure that whatever I'm doing is advancing what's written in the Truth and Reconciliation document. And so thank you so much. And let me see what the instructions we have here. So after the session, go back to Swap Card for the keynote panel. And this is where we'll find Annie again, correct? All right. Indigenous inclusion and beyond. And so Annie, I guess I will see you shortly. And thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone. If you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You'll find my details on Swap Card. I'm really, really honored to have to continue have conversations. So thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Annie. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.